IVM.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories. Hope you're all well and keeping safe. On the podcast today, we have a very special guest, Vatsal Nandu, the founder of Nomads of India, a very, very thriving travel community that Vatsal founded back in 2017. In addition to the episode, we're also doing a quick giveaway of some merchandise that Nomads of India and Vatsal sell through their website. So let's hop onto the episode and find out where Vatsal is taking us today. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Vatsal Nandu, a traveler and founder of travel community Nomads of India. Vatsal, thank you so much for being a part of the Musafir Stories and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seth, for having me. For the podcast. I've been listening to the podcast for quite some time. I remember listening to the very first episode. I think for me was the Shivya Nath one, and I'm really glad to be part of this podcast. I hope I'm able to do justice to this platform.
No, we're absolutely delighted to have you, Vatsal, and like we touched upon in the intro as well, you are a part of a very popular travel community as well, Nomads of India. But yeah, it was very brief when I mentioned that in the intro. Why don't you speak a little bit more about yourself and the community as well?
Sure. So, I come from a sports management background. Having said that, I've worked in the sports management community for the past 10 years. Currently, I work for a firm called Brooks Running India, which is part of the global Brooks Running team, which is under Berkshire Hathaway. That's my professional career. But as a passion project, I also run a community called Nomads of India, like you just spoke about. Initially in 2017, when I started trekking, there wasn't much of information available about trekking to a lot of places. It was available, but it was done by the organizations themselves. So there weren't very many DIY guides, right? So that is
Sure.
one of the reasons I thought about starting Nomads of India, where I provide information about DIY guides of treks around Maharashtra, because I'm from Bombay. So I trek a lot around Maharashtra. So, and since 2017, I've started Nomads of India, and it's at the moment, we kind of get around 15 to 20K visitors on our website monthly, and we have an Instagram following of around 33,000. So it's a great platform to kind of share my travel stories from others. So yeah, that's Nomads of India in a summary.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a thriving community, like I said, and we'll definitely make sure to link to the website as well as the socials, so our listeners can also check it out. Really, really glad to have you on the podcast. And like we have the usual tradition with the Musafir Stories, whenever we have a guest traveler come and speak with us, we request them to take us on a journey that they've been a part of or experienced recently. So with that in mind, where are you taking us to today, Vatsal?
Oof. So this place where I'm taking you is very close to my heart, very seriously. The place is called Zanskar, but I'll also talk briefly about Suru Valley. So Zanskar and Suru Valley, they are close to each other, which are basically in the Ladakh region.
Wonderful. We've briefly touched upon Zanskar in the past, but like you will also mention, like Zanskar has always just been used synonymously with the Chadar trek, but it's actually much more beyond that. So we'll really be looking into what you have to share with us as a part of that journey. How long of an itinerary was this? And also, can you give us a little bit of a background into how to get there, and also what is a good time to visit this place? Because obviously, given the geographical location that it's in the northern part of the country in the Union Territory of Ladakh, it's not open around the year, right? Not necessarily accessible around the year. So can you share some details like that?
Sure. So, place like Zanskar, it require at least 5 to 6 days to kind of enjoy the place entirely, to go to all the places, to experience the culture, the local people, their, the hospitality, everything. For to experience this entire thing, you kind of require 5 to 6 days just for Zanskar. And let's say if you add Suru Valley to it, like I did, you will of course need more than that. You need 3 4 more days. So my itinerary, so I traveled to Suru Valley and Zanskar. I was there for around 12 days. So I started from Srinagar, then I had gone to Kargil. So I'll tell you how it all happens. Basically, from
Okay.
Srinagar, you can take a bus to Kargil, and from Kargil, you can take another shared cab all the way to Padum, which is the main city, the main town of Zanskar. I mean, that's the easier route. But if you want to cover Suru Valley, so it's a bit complicated, but you can do it easily if you are well versed traveling solo, hitchhiking. So I took the bus from Srinagar to Kargil, and from Kargil, because I wanted to visit Suru Valley as well, right? So the main town in Suru Valley is Sanku. So from Kargil to Sanku is approximately 1.5 hours of drive, and you can get a lot of local buses, shared taxis. You can even hitchhike to Sanku, which is like the main
Okay.
entry point of Suru Valley. From Sanku, if you want to go to Padum, there's no option to go to Padum directly. The only way you can do it, you'll have to hitchhike, which is what I did. But if someone is not comfortable hitchhiking, they'll have to go to Kargil again and take a shared cab all the way to Padum, which is a drive of approximately 12 hours or something. Yeah, approximately 12 hours.
Okay. Yeah, so quite a little bit of an adventure you've had. But like you mentioned, for somebody who may be a little more comfortable with the traditional ways of getting from one place to the other, they might have to spend a little bit extra time. And also, again, like depends on your preference. For a lot of us, this could potentially be like a once in a lifetime type of trip, right? So it's better that you take your time, right, and do this over a period of 10, 12 days or whatever, if you're covering both of them, or even like 5 to 6 days, even if it's just for Zanskar, right? So obviously, if you're closer and if you happen to make multiple trips to the area, you could always break this up into individual trips of their own. And what time of the year did you travel there, and what's a good time to be there?
Yeah. Before I get to that, I'll also tell you, you can get to Padum from Leh and from Manali. So from Leh, there's a new road which is the government is working on making a new road which goes through Lingshed. Of course, you are aware of the Chadar trek, right? So the route from Leh to Chadar trek, they are making like a roadway which connects the town of Padum to Leh, so which is still under construction, but there are a lot of local shared taxis which will take you to that route. But it's very, I mean, I wouldn't advise people to take that route because it's a very, I mean, basically it's not a road at all at the moment. It's just a
Right.
kacha rasta, if you can call it. And from Manali via Shinkula Pass you can go to Padu. So that distance is again around 10 12 to 13 hours, and all of these cost around 2,400 to 2,600 rupees a seat. So of course you'll have to negotiate, and that's how you can get to Padum, which is Zanskar Valley's main town.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of what time of the year one should possibly plan a trip to this region, what would you recommend? And what about you? When do you visit?
So, like Leh, even Zanskar, Padum, all these places in Zanskar are open from the window of May to October. But if you want to really explore, I mean, you want to see the greenery, the vibe of the place of Suru Valley, and the local activities in and around Padum, the best time would be July, August, or September, because this is when a
Okay.
lot of travelers also travel to this part of the country.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. So thank you for kind of setting up the context and the background for this trip, so that way a lot of the other things we speak to will make sense too. When you were planning and getting ready for the trip, what was on your mind in terms of the itinerary itself? Like, what are the things you were looking at exploring, and also from a traditional or a historical perspective too? Like this region, especially the Zanskar region, has traditionally had a lot of the Tibetan Buddhism influence, right? So that's what it's been heavily influenced by. So when you were planning the trip, was the goal to explore the region, given its cultural background and monasteries and stuff like that, or what was on your agenda?
Yep, yep. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to go to Zanskar was for the Fuktil monastery. It's the most beautiful monastery I've ever seen. And I mean, I've been to places, of course, but the thing is, Fuktil monastery, it's out of this world. I mean, no photo, no video, no podcast. I mean, I'm really sorry, but nothing can describe the beauty of that place, because that was one of the main reasons. So I read about Fuktil Monastery in around, I think around 2017. And then around 2018 or 2019, I saw I mean, there are two vloggers called Ronnie and Bati. So I saw their video of the Fuktil Monastery and I was blown away.
Yeah, I'm glad that you finally made it to the place. And yeah, like you rightly mentioned, there's definitely a lot of historical significance and cultural significance to this trip as well, because usually people tend to relate this region with the natural beauty, right? Obviously, it's a beautiful place, no denying that fact, but from a cultural perspective as well, there's a lot to be discovered and appreciated. So we'll look forward to uncovering that with you. So let's dive into the itinerary, and why don't you take us, I guess, beginning from you said you're starting off from Kargil at this point, right? So why don't you take us with you and let us know what are the things you experienced?
So, of course, I started from Kargil. Day one, basically, you start from Kargil. And on the same day, I mean, you can reach Sanku in 2 to 3 hours. And there's not a lot of things to do in and around Sanku. In Sanku, there's a place called Kartse Khar. So, traditionally, from what I've read and I heard in Sanku, it was ruled by the Kartse kingdom, and so that's why the name gets the place gets the name Kartse Khar. So there's a place called Kartse Khar ruins, and there's a Maitreya Buddha statue in there. So basically the ruins, Kartse Khar ruins and Maitreya Buddha statue are the main reason you'll want to hang around some. If you wanna see only things, then these are the two things you'll see around Sanku. After Sanku, there's a place called Parkachik and Panikhar. So Panikhar and Parkachik are famous for the Nun Kun peaks. So you get these are two 7,000 plus 7,000 meters plus peaks in the Suru Valley region. So places like Panikhar and Sanku are very famous for the views of the Nun Kun peak. So from the months of November to Feb or March, I think around that period, the both the peaks are always covered in snow. But either of Nun or Kun peak, when the summer months come in and when during the monsoon months, one of the peaks you won't find any snow, but on the other peak you'll find snow throughout the year, like all the 12 months. So it's a very beautiful sight. I mean, you can see the entire the mountain view from the village of Panikhar. So basically, Panikhar is famous for the mountain view of Nun Kun peaks. You won't find a lot of things to do in and around Suru Valley, but it's the people, the hospitality. This is what one of the reasons why people should travel to Suru Valley. So I'll give you a few instances. So when I was on my way to Kartse Khar ruins from Sanku, which is around 5 to 6 kilometers from Sanku village, I decided I'll just walk it to the place because it's just 5 to 6 kilometers. But on my way, I saw a car passing by, and I just asked for a lift. And that person decided, and he kind of politely told me, "Of course, get in. I mean, I don't mind. I'm not going entirely to the Kartse Khar ruins, but I'll drop you halfway." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll walk the other half." But then once he reached his destination, he's like, "कोई बात नहीं, मैं आपको पूरा end तक छोड़ दूंगा." So the hospitality of the people. He wasn't supposed to go to the place where I was supposed to go, but he instead dropped me to the very end. He even guided me कि यहाँ पे ये है, आप इसकी history देखो. These are the places. This is the history of this place. You can go from this direction, etc. on my way back from the ruins, I again, of course, I again hitchhiked. I mean, that was primarily my source of transport, my mode of transport throughout Suru Valley and Zanskar. So on my way back, there was another person who gave me the lift. And after dropping me to Sanku, instead of going his own way, he invited me to his friend's cafe, to a dhaba, to have coffee, tea. So these people are very fond of travelers. They kind of help you out. They go out of their way to help you out. So that's Suru Valley in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I'm like obviously very early on in the conversation, this topic has come up, and this is a recurring theme as well, right? It's not like the first time. The hospitality of the locals is something that's always mentioned and appreciated, and I think what's even more kind of heartening is they live in pretty difficult conditions, right? Like from a weather or climatic perspective, and they still kind of go out of their way to help out travelers and people who are getting from place to place. That's really something that's very appreciable. And one thing that caught my eye, even when I was looking at some of the places you mentioned, the Kartse Khar ruins, right? That's how you call it. Probably not in terms of magnitude, but the Maitreya Buddha, it's almost like a rock sculpture into the face of a mountain, right,
Yes.
and the face of a rock. So again, it's pretty huge. It reminded me of the Burmese Buddha statues. Again, it might not be as huge as those, but kind of like takes you back to that, right? It kind of gives you that feeling. So I'm glad that you got to do this, and this is fairly close from when you started. You said about 5-6 kilometers from how far away from?
So, in terms of kilometers, I don't remember, but it'll take around 2 hours, to
2 hours.
2.5
Okay.
hours to reach from Kargil. Of course, there are a
Okay.
lot more
Okay.
places, like there's a place called Tambis Waterfall, the Sapi Lake Trek. You can do all these things, but it's ideal to do when you have your own vehicle, because the public transport here
Sure.
is not very good. There's an organization called Roots Ladakh. So they kind of focus on ecological travel, so they take you to these places for treks as well.
Okay, wonderful. And beyond this, was there more places in the Suru Valley that you covered off, or what is the plan from
Yeah,
here?
so on day one, I'd reached Sanku, and then I traveled to Kartse Khar ruins, and I was there for the night, and I'd stayed at this place called Goba Guest House. And in Suru Valley, you won't find any restaurants or any hotels. So you'll have to primarily rely on these guest houses, homestay run by local people. I mean, it's not even a guest house. Basically, they have spare rooms available in their
Right.
homes, so they kind of lent it out to travelers who travel during the peak season, which is May to October. And so from there, I headed to a place called Parkachik, which is another 1.5 hour bus ride from Sanku. So from Kargil to Parkachik and Panikhar, you can get bus rides easily. So there are local buses, private local buses running from Kargil to Panikhar, and Panikhar to Kargil all the way back throughout the day. So you can get buses till Parkachik and Panikhar. Beyond that, you cannot get any vehicle. So my second destination was Panikkar, mainly for the view of the Nun Kun peaks, which I told you about earlier.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why people stay in Parkachik, to get the view of the Nun Kun peaks. So
Okay.
Parkachik is also famous for the Parkachik glacier, which is it's not that big a glacier like the Siachen glacier, but it's pretty big, and it's a good sight. I mean, you can see the entire ice wall on just on the main road. From the main road, you can actually see the glacier coming down. But it's usually much more bigger in the months of winter, basically, because it snows. And during the months of summer and monsoon, it's not that big, but it's still a good sight to have a look at the glacier. So I was there I was there for 2 days in Panikkar, and I had taken a trip to Parkachik. But if someone is in their own vehicle, so they can also take a day trip, not the day trip, but they can also stop at Rangdum. Rangdum is basically on the edge of Zanskar and Suru Valley. It technically falls in Suru Valley, but the habitat, the local culture is more Tibetan, which is the Zanskar Valley. So it's like a small village with a few houses here and there, and the famous Rangdum monastery. Oh, and I also forgot to tell you, when you go from Parkachik to Rangdum, on the way you will come across the Pensila Pass. And after the Pensila Pass, there's a huge glacier. It's called the Drang Drung Glacier. And from what I've read, it's the fifth largest glacier in the world and the second largest glacier or third largest glacier in India. And it's a very huge glacier. I mean, you can see the entire. It's like around 25 odd kilometers long, and you can stop at the Pensila Pass and take photos of this amazing glacier. You can see the entire white snow. I mean, it's a road basically of white snow.
Okay, great. And I think it's still early on in the itinerary, I know, but it's been a good mix of the different types of places you're seeing also, right? You've gone to the ruins of the ruins and the Buddha statue at Kartse. Then you've been to a glacier. We've stopped on at a monastery as well close by. So there's a few different places, and obviously the view of the peaks as well at Panikhar. So it's already giving you a sense of how rich and diverse these itineraries can be, especially in areas like this, right? So it's not just nature or not just trekking, if one is think about it in that way. And having spent some time here at the Drang Drung glacier, where were you headed off to from here?
So from Panikkar, I took a hitchhike truck ride all the way to Padu, which was around I think 12 to 14 hours in the truck. So I think
Oh
it will be
wow.
much lesser if someone is on in their own vehicle. They're around 10 hours, 10 to 12 hours. But because it's a truck ride, it's kind of very slow, and they stop at various locations to drop off their stuff. So of course, I'd gone to Padum after that.
Okay, so getting to Padum from here is technically, you could say, start of the Zanskar Valley leg of the itinerary, right?
Yes.
And like you mentioned, the alternative is for somebody who wants to rely on public transport or shared cabs and stuff like that, they'll have to travel back to Kargil and then take a ride from there, correct?
Yeah, take a shared cab,
Yeah.
but that is also very unreliable. I mean, not unreliable, but I've heard of people missing out on cabs because there are very few people locals travel all the way from Kargil to Padum. If all the 8 seats are taken, only then these cab drivers take the journey. Otherwise, they'll
Okay.
just cancel the cab altogether.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, makes sense. And tell us a little bit about Padam. This is supposed to be what I don't know if it's the capital or the administrative capital, or it is an important town in the Zanskar Valley, though, right?
Yeah, it is actually the administrative capital of the Zanskar Valley. It's a very small town. I mean, you can say the road is, I mean, it's approximately 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers at the max. That's the entire town distance. And there are houses built in and around this 1 kilometer road.
Okay.
So you'll find good. Of course, Padum is very famous at the moment because a lot of people travel from Manali, from Leh, from Kargil as well. So you can easily find a lot of places to stay, good food to eat. So compared to Suru Valley, Padum is much more, is accustomed to having travelers, accustomed to having a lot of tourists.
Okay. So you used Padam as a base then to explore around the Zanskar Valley. Is that how it was planned?
Yes. So I stayed there in Padum for no, I actually 5 nights and 6 days. So that
Okay.
was my duration in Padum. But you can cover all the places in and around Padum in a day or two. But I wanted to kind of travel slowly,
Sure.
interact with the locals, just take my time and go to places. I don't like to visit places very in a very rushed manner. I kind of like to take my time and go around places, enjoy. So I was there for 5 nights and 6 days. So what I'll do, I'll start from Padum. On the first day when I reached Padum, I was just there in Padum, just exploring the town, interacting with locals. And the second day, I took a cab to a place called Purne. So my idea was to go to Phuktal monastery for the trek. So to get to Phuktal monastery, you have to take a cab from Padum all the way to Purne, which is around 2.5 hours to three hours ride again.
Okay.
Yeah, and from Purne you can hike all the way to Phuktal Monastery. It's not a very big hike. It's probably 3-4 kilometers, and it'll take you around 1.5 to 2 hours to reach to Phuktal Monastery. So that was my plan for the day. And luckily, when I was traveling to Phuktal Monastery in the cab, I met two fellow travelers. One of them was from Udaipur, and one was from Japan. So luckily we hit off, and we kind of then decided to travel to Gonbo Rongjon as well.
Okay.
So I start with Phuktal Monastery. Basically the trek is 1.5 hours, like I said earlier. It's a very, I mean, it's a easy trek, and I think a lot of people, I think anyone can do the trek. Basically, it's not like a very difficult trek, and the entire trek is trekking next to a river, which is the Zanskar River, and it's proper rugged mountains. You won't see any tree, you won't see any grass, no sorts of greenery at all. But it's a very beautiful sight. The entire river is proper blue, and once we reached the Phuktal Monastery, the view. So basically, Phuktal Monastery is carved inside a big mountain. It's a very beautiful monastery, and that was one of the main reasons for me visiting
Yeah.
Zanskar.
Yeah, it does have that feel of a honeycomb, like you say, right? It's
Yeah.
almost etched into the face of the rock, like you said. And even from what I was looking up, apparently, obviously, it has been built over time. But initially, when this was started off, it was like in a cave, basically, right? That's how the
Yes.
monastery started off. And eventually, over the last 2000 odd years or so, we've seen structures built. And it's been historically, and like I said, even for the Tibetan, from a Tibetan Buddhism point of view, it's been very significant. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about once you made that trek and got up to the Phuktal monastery as well. Given that this is also one of the places that actually set you off on this journey, right? So how was that experience, and what were you seeing inside the monastery?
Yeah, so I think after we reached, I mean, we reached around 1 o'clock, which was the lunch period for all the monks. So, I mean, when we reached, they were all just about to start their lunch. So I mean, one of the monks invited us over for the lunch. He was like, please have your lunch with us. We have come all the way from, whatever places you guys have come from. So they invited us for lunch. And I mean, these monks are very helpful. They like to interact with a lot of travelers coming there. They have their own stories. So I remember talking to one of the monks. He had traveled to Bombay, so he was aware about all the places I was mentioning when I said I'm from Bombay. So he was one of the I mean, the elder monks in the monastery. And when we were there, there were around 150 to 200 monks doing their monk studies, basically. They are studying for Buddhism. And inside the monastery, there are two temples. They allow you to visit both the temples inside the monastery, but of course you aren't allowed to take photographs of the monastery. But it's a very pretty sight. It's very calming from once you go there inside the temple, and you want to kind of sit there, soak in the energy, be sit there for 10-15 minutes, just do nothing, just be there, meditate. It's that kind of a vibe. Yeah, so it's a very good place to be at, and it's basically one of the best monasteries I've been to, without a doubt.
Yeah, and like I was saying from the beginning as well, apparently, like the name or the etymology of the name, it roughly translates into the Cave of Liberation or Liberation Cave or something like that. Fokantal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that also ties back to that initial comment I made about it almost starting off as a cave, and then eventually over time this has been built. And one other interesting fact I saw about this, I don't know if you saw a mention of this too, either from like heard it from the monks or even read it while you were planning the itinerary. This place was actually completely cut off from civilization, like up until the 19th century, right? And only in the around the 19th century, Hungarian historian Alexander Soma de Koros, might be butchering his name, but he was the one who actually visited this in the 1800s, and after that is when it started to become a little more accessible. But before that, it had been like completely cut off from civilization, and people like the monks and people who seek enlightenment, they've been there, but for the outsiders, this has completely been cut off. So that was also something interesting I came about, and you'll probably hear this name from time to time for other places also in the region. The Hungarian historian, he did a lot of work in terms of even translation or translating a lot of the works from Tibetan into the other languages, right? Like the dictionaries and stuff like that. So he seems to be popular in the area and the precinct. So just a few important tidbits about the Vuktal monastery too. Any other highlights or callouts from the trek to the monastery, Vatsal?
Yeah, actually, I mean, so from what I remember, it's the monks have been living there for like more than 2000 years, from what I remember. Yeah, that's that. And I mean, if someone wants to camp overnight, so they can come back all the way to Pune. So there's a guest house which allows you to. They have set up camps, like there are 10 to 12 tents outside their house, which they allow to give people to rent for camping
Okay.
for overnight. They'll charge you around 1,000 rupees, and you can camp there. They'll even give you the lunch, the dinner, and the breakfast the next day. So but
Okay.
we didn't stay there. So the idea was, like I said earlier, I met these two travelers from Japan and Udaipur, right? So their plan was to go to Gonbo Rongjon, which is also a part of Zanskar, which it's a very big mountain. So if you remember from your childhood days, you know how we draw the mountains, like exactly a triangle mountain with
Yeah.
clouds and the sun. Just imagine that, and that's exactly how the mountain looks. It's
Yeah.
like proper triangular shaped mountain, and it's a very, so the name is Gonbo Rongchon, and it's like a holy mountain for the Zanskari people. So they consider it as a very holy mountain. And you can also I think since 2020 or 2021 they've set up camps there. So that was our plan. So the guest house at Purne, the person running it, he told us he will drop us to the camping site, the Gonboranjan mountain, and he'll pick up again the next day. But of course, they charge you 4,000 to 5,000 rupees for this journey. So if you're traveling alone, it doesn't make sense,
Right.
because that wasn't on my itinerary earlier. But because I was sharing the expense with two other travelers, then it made more sense, right? You are just paying approximately 1,000 or
Yeah.
1,500 rupees for that trip. So that was the plan. So we had gone to Gondoranjan the same day when we arrived from the trek. So we finished the trek around 2:30 p.m. We came back. We had the lunch there. We came back to the village Purne, and from there the Gondoranjan is around 3 hours. So that was the plan. We traveled the same day to Gonboranjan. And we were very lucky. It was a completely clear weather. There was no signs of rainfall at all. So, I mean, just imagine that triangular shaped mountain with millions of stars in the background, no moonlight as well. I mean, there was and
Yeah.
there was absolutely no cloud. So, we got a very clear view of the night sky around 12:30 or 1:30 a.m. basically. So you have to stay outside the tent, but it gets very cold because the altitude is around 14,000 feet of the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things you actually mentioned right at the beginning, that it looks magnificent, right? And also it's a little different from the other mountains in the area, because obviously a lot of the others you'd see are a part of ranges. So there's other mountains around. So you, even though they're huge and really tall, like you still see them in relation to the others. But this one is almost like solitary, right? So that way also it feels a lot more magnificent when you're looking at it. And I'm also really glad that you got to enjoy the view at night as well. It's not just something to enjoy during the day. You also enjoyed the night skies and the beautiful galaxy of stars during the night. That is one thing that you can take full advantage of in areas like this due to the little or no light pollution, you get a really, really good view of the stars. And thankfully, you got lucky too with the weather being, or the skies being clear and not being overcast or anything. So, all in all, I think it was definitely worth that 3-4 hour journey that you had to make to Gongborangchon. And it looks like this was pretty much planned on the go, right? This a part of
Yes.
your earlier itinerary, or only because you ran into a couple of good fellow travelers who came up with this plan?
Yep. I mean, it was never part of the plan, but I
Okay.
mean, it's just luck, and when
Yeah.
you're traveling solo, you're not really very traveling solo. You just meet people on
Yeah.
the road, and just things happen.
So yeah, but after Gambok John, what was the plan after this? Right, where were you headed from here? And
Yeah.
were you still tag teaming with your fellow travelers beyond this point?
Yes. So
Okay.
the next day after, I mean, we kind of enjoyed the sunrise at the Gonburonjon, and we left around 11 o'clock in the morning for back to Padum. It's a 5-6 hour drive because 3 hours to Purne, and from there again you take 2.5-3 hours to Padum. So I think we reached around evening time back to Padum, and we had nothing to do. We just wanted to be there, just relax. So, and very recently, in Padum, there's a place called Za Pizza, Za Pizza. So it's the only place that serves pizza in Padum, and basically out of the pizza oven. I mean, it's a very good place to have your coffee or just enjoy it. So one of the travelers from Udaipur, he had to leave the next day, but the person Akira from Japan, he was with me for the next 2 days as well. So we traveled together further, and then the next morning, the plan was to so around Padum there are 4 to 5 places you can visit. One is Karsha Monastery, one is Stongde Monastery. Then there's this place called Zangla Palace,
Okay.
then this place called Sheila Waterfall. So we divided these places into 2 days.
2 days. Okay.
So
Okay.
one day we covered Zangla Palace, Karsha Monastery, and Stongde Monastery. And on the next day, we covered Sheila Waterfall and Sani Lake and Sani Monastery.
Okay.
So these are the places you can visit when you are in Padum.
Okay, wonderful. So let's get on. I guess the first Tongdale and Karsha Monastery, along with the Zangla Palace, you said was
Yeah,
what
yeah.
was the three? Okay, cool. Please go on and let us know how your experience was.
So we first visited Zangla Palace because it's the farthest of all the places. So while coming back, you can visit to both Karsha Monastery and Stormday Monastery. So Zangla Palace is basically, it's not a palace anymore. It's just ruins of the palace, but the entire Zanskar region was ruled by this Zangla royal family. I don't remember during what period, but yes, they were ruled by the Zangla royal family, and that's why the name gets the Zangla Palace. It's ruins of the entire palace. You can see, I mean, broken doors and all that stuff. But the view from the area of the entire region is amazing. I mean, on a clear day, you can see all the big mountains around Zangla, and it's a very, I mean, it's a good place to be at, just to relax, chill. I mean, be there for like 10-15 minutes.
Okay, okay, yeah. Again, like, don't have any grand notions of seeing like a big palace or a fort like you would see in other places like Rajasthan or something. This
Yeah.
is, yeah, this is diminutive, and also it's in ruins, right? Like you mentioned, it was apparently between the 16th and 19th century that this royal family ruled there. Yeah, definitely worth a visit, though. One of the, again, historically significant places, like Vatsal mentioned. And the interesting part, right? Again, I mentioned earlier about the Hungarian historian slash scholar. Like the palace, obviously it's in ruins now, but it was on the verge of collapsing and completely being wiped out. And it was again a Hungarian NGO of sorts because of the connection to this historian and this scholar who did the translations of the dictionary and everything that I said, the Tibetan dictionary to English. That NGO actually helped a lot in restoration and even the state that is in today, right? So hats off to organizations like these that are taking this up to preserve and conserve. quick call out there. But yeah, after Zangla, on the way back, you're making stops at the Stongdale and Karsha monasteries, right? Yeah. So go on, Vatsal. Like, how was your experience, and any unique things that you experienced in these monasteries?
So after Zangla Palace, we visited Karsha Monastery. So Karsha Monastery is, I believe, it's the biggest monastery in the Zanskar region, and it has a very big significance when it comes to Tibetan culture. And I think it is somehow related to Padmasambhava. So Karsha Monastery is the biggest monastery, and from what I read, there are Zanskar has a lot of festivals. So one of the festivals happens in the Karsha Monastery itself. Of course, we couldn't attend that because the I think it happens in the month of July, and we were there in the month of August.
Okay.
So it's a very big monastery. Again, there's a temple. There's a different place where monks stay. I mean, it's divided into 4 5 sections, and it's like 5 6 stories long monastery. So, but the main temple is at the very beginning. Like once you enter the monastery, you can get the entry to the main temple. Again, like all the other monasteries, you aren't allowed to kind of take photographs here, but on from the inside, you amazing architecture. I mean, all the sculptures, all the paintings inside the monastery. It's just mind blowing. I mean, you can't imagine like how people must be doing it back then, but it's really beautiful to just be there, sit inside, enjoy. I mean, just view the history of the entire Tibetan culture depicted on the on the architectural side, on the paintings. So on our way back from Karsha Monastery, we visited Stongde Monastery.
Okay.
So back when we were in Stongde Monastery, it was under construction. So a lot of the places in the monastery were not open to a lot of travelers. Like you can't go to a certain sections of the monastery, but the Stongde Monastery, the view you will see the Stongde village from the monastery. It's a very very beautiful view. Like you can see green brown patches, like rectangular square shaped patches of the entire village. Like the green patches are basically the farmlands, then another rectangular patch next to it of the village. It's a very beautiful, like aesthetically pleasing sight from the monastery. And luckily, when we were at the monastery, the monks were having their prayers. So luckily we got a chance to monks doing their prayers. They invited us. We again there for they gave us butter tea and biscuits. These monks are, I mean, all these monks and all these monasteries that we had visited are just way too good. Their hospitality is on a different level compared to what we see in our cities, right?
Yeah, with all of the facilities and with all the amenities, we still choose to be the way we are. What can we say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's something we definitely should appreciate. And this is the Stongdale Monastery, right? That you're speaking of? Stongday. Okay, great. So you covered off all these places in like one of the days, and on the next day is when you planned for Sunny Lake and Monastery and the other places, right?
Yeah.
Vatsal? Okay, yeah. Tell us how your experience there was, and was there anything distinctive that you found in these places?
So, I mean, on the next day, so we came back, of course, in the evening. We again had our regular pizza at Za Pizza. Then the next day, we traveled to Sheila Waterfall and Sunny Lake and Sunny Monastery. So, Sheila, I mean, the Sheila Waterfall is not like a waterfall that you'll see in the southern or the western parts of India, right? Not that huge. It's not that it's like a dry waterfall, but it's pretty good, and you won't find a lot of people there. So I mean, if you wanna read a book or just be there, sit, take photos, take videos, just be there. It's a good place to sit. They have a seating area as well, so you can sit there, just enjoy the waterfall. Just below the waterfall, there's a pond kind of a structure where you can kind of go in. So you can kind of, yeah, put your feet, enjoy the cold water. You can do all of that things uh, in the waterfall. I mean, it's a good site. It's a good place to be at.
Okay, yeah, apparently like named after the village where it is, right? That's, I guess, the significance of the name itself.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
It get Sheila village. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and the other places were the Sunny Lake and Monastery. Is that what you visited next?
Yeah. So Sunny Lake, it's not a big lake. It's kind of a pond, but they call it a lake. uh, and right in the center of the pond, there's a big statue of Padmasambhava, which, of course, is very relevant in the Buddhist culture. So, and from what I spoke to the locals go there for a picnic, or it's there's a big grassland around the lake where the locals just sit and enjoy their meals, like a weekend kind of picnic, Sunday picnic. So when we were there, we saw a lot of school kids coming there, just sitting there, having fun, playing games, singing songs. So it's that kind of a place. And the monastery again, like all the other monastery, Song de Karsha, it's again a beautiful monastery to be at.
Yeah, I believe they also have a stupa of it's called the Kanika stupa of King Kanishka, historically also like the ruler of the Kushan Empire. From a historical standpoint, that also seems to be quite a significant milestone. So a lot of people take interest in that. And but yeah, like you
Yes.
mentioned, the iconic Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava statue in the center of the lake or the pond that you mentioned, right? I think that's what it is most renowned
Yes.
for, and also kind of stands out from the rest of the monasteries that way, right? So I'm glad that you're getting to see like different aspects within these different, like all of them do tie back primarily to the Tibetan Buddhist culture. So there are ought to be similarities, but even within the monasteries, you're seeing like different monasteries have different things that are
Significant.
unique to them. Yeah, distinctive also, right? Like be it the paintings in one of the monasteries or the Padmasambhava statue in this monastery and others like that. So I'm glad that you got to enjoy all of that. Are we kind of close to the end of your itinerary at this point, or did you have like more places that you had planned on stopping by and exploring?
No, and these were the places that we visited, and these are the places that most of the travelers or people who plan to travel will visit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you plan on doing other things, like we mentioned at the beginning, Chadar Trek is one of the
Yeah,
things.
of course.
It's first, so if you do that, you probably do just that, and you won't get into exploring other things like you did, right? So if you're doing that, do it as a standalone itinerary. And you mentioned a few along the way as well, right? Sapi Lake Trek, I think, was something you called out as well earlier.
Yes.
So those are things in the vicinity that you could do. But anything else you'd like to mention, like places in the vicinity people could check out in case they have an extended itinerary or if they plan on making a second trip to the region?
Yeah. So just before that, I wanted to point out. So Lake actually starts. It's very far from Padum. I mean, the lake, the trek actually is very closer. It's much more closer to lake than it's closer to Padum. So, but it's the Zanskar River, so that's why it gets the name Chadar
Right.
Trek. Yeah. So, but apart from that, there's also from what there are a few trekking companies that organize the Varwan Valley Trek, which starts from the village of Panikhar. Which, of course, if someone wants to trek, they can have Suru Valley clubbed with a trek. They can do the Varwan Valley Trek and they can explore Suru Valley. In and around Padum, there's not much more I think you can do, but if you want, you can probably stay at Rangdum if you want. And at the Pencila Pass, I've read or and even seen videos about of travelers camping at the Pencila Pass. So, of course, that you can do if you have your own camping equipments. So that's the other thing that you can do.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of other options in case you want to do outdoorsy activities or activities like this, like trek, right? So you could sign up. One of the things we usually touch during the podcast, but during this one we didn't touch a lot upon for obvious reasons. Definitely is something I'd like to touch upon quickly and check from a food or local cuisine perspective. I know we stopped at the Za Pizza and you kind of enjoyed that. That is a luxury, right? In places like these where not everything is accessible, that is a luxury. But from a local cuisine or food standpoint, was there anything that you want to mention or highlight?
Sure. While you're in Suru Valley, there's not, I don't remember seeing any restaurant there. So you basically have to rely on the homestays and the guest house where you are staying. and because it's a predominantly a Muslim area, right? So you can have access to a lot of non-vegetarian cuisine. Unfortunately, I'm a vegetarian, so I mean I couldn't try. That's
Yeah.
about Suru Valley. But in Zanskar, of course, because it's a Tibetan culture, so you can get your thukpas,
Yeah.
your I mean all those things. But I'll briefly mention the places where we had our lunch, dinner while we were in Padum, which was Pizza, of course, I mentioned earlier. But there are two, three places more. One is Zanskar Kitchen, which is a very budget alternative. Like you can get your normal Punjabi food items like the roti, sabzi, dal, rice types. And
Okay.
there's also this place called Karsha Chamlin Hotel. I remember seeing a restaurant, not a restaurant, but like a small cafe kind of a thing, which served Korean food, but it was shut. But on the door, I remember they had mentioned Korean food served here. But
Okay.
yeah, if someone is lucky, they can enjoy Korean food if it's open. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, obviously, like options will be limited given some of the challenges the region faces. But I'm glad that at least you did get to try some of these things. And yeah, even with locals, I think things like, especially when you visit the monastery, things like the yak butter tea, right? So things
Yes.
like that. Make sure you try them out. If somebody wants to check out a little bit of an extension on Ladakhi or cuisine of this place, we also did an episode on Ladakh recently where we called out other things one could try out beyond the tukpa and the momos. There was chutagi, was another dumpling-based soup. Tingmo was the local bread, I believe, as well as churpe, which were dried yak cheese, almost like chips, you could say, but basically dried yak cheese, right? So, a lot of other things beyond some of the things that you usually tend to get in accessible restaurants and stuff like that. Again, I'd like to thank you, Vatsal. Like, it was a very, very detailed itinerary, right from how to go, how to get to places, to when to plan, to what are the different places you see, and a lot of them were very, very offbeat, right? You obviously people have started to go there now a little bit more, but still relatively very, very offbeat compared to others like the Chadar Trek that have been commercialized a little bit more. So while you can do it, maybe you should try and do it before the place starts to get more crowded. But thank you so much. I know you mentioned at the beginning that it's really, really hard to capture the beauty of such places, even in like pictures and videos, leave alone audio podcasts like these, but you still did a great job in trying to make the experience as descriptive and as holistic as possible by covering the different aspects of it, setting the context of it, and also giving some very handy advice and tips for people planning on going there. In terms of how people can continue to follow your work, and if somebody is not aware of the community, the travel community, Nomads of India, could you please quickly share how one could access the community?
Sure, sure. If someone wants to know about Zanskar more, they want to read up, of course, they can always message me or message on Instagram like nomadsofindia.com or Nomads of India just on Instagram.
Yeah, 100%. We'll make sure we link all of these social media handles on the website as well as link to the blog post that you've written, a very, very detailed blog post on how one can make a trip to the Zanskar Valley region. Once again, Vatsal, thank you so much for being on the podcast and helping us cover this wonderful, wonderful region in India that is still very, very less explored, if I can say that. Thank you, Vatsal, and it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Saif. I mean, it was my pleasure as well. I mean, being here. I just hope that even if one person after listening to this podcast travels to Zanskar, and I'll be very happy. I mean, the place Zanskar, Suru, they both deserve visiting. I mean, just have to experience the culture, the hospitality. It's out of this world. So I just hope that people do end up going to these places after hearing the podcast.
Absolutely. The pleasure and the honor is all ours. And we look forward to hopefully having you back on the podcast as well in the future. Thanks so much, Vatsal.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.